Okay, Nicole, you're on. Nicole, are you there?
Yes, I am, but there's like a square in the middle of this of my screen.
Well, we've got your presentation up.
Second. I can't work on it because there's a box on my end. Right.
Is it me?
Well, it's the recording box and I can't push the, okay, here we go. Got it. 1 second. Okay. All right. So can you see my title screen now? Okay, yes. Great. Well, thank you so much for having me, the villagers. I have had the opportunity to bird in your area. It's very beautiful, very birdy. I helped out with the Christmas bird count this year. So thank you for having me. So this is about my accidental big year. And you might be wondering, what is a big year? And like Gary was saying, it's a whole calendar year. And it's there's certain territories, like some people do the lower 48, or you could do traditional ABA, which is all of America except for Hawaii and Canada, or now what the new ABA is now including Hawaii, so all of the US and Canada. And I did all three, but I mainly focused on traditional and with Hawaii. So there are different codes for the birds. So it's 1 through 5. So code 1 birds are like this American oyster catcher that these two all breed regularly in the United States or Canada. And then a code 2 bird would be Olympian. Code 3 are lower numbers, but annually seen, like a shiny cowbird you might have seen there in Florida. Code 4 is like a Zenaida dove, so 6 or more, but not annually. Code 5, so there are fewer than 5, or fewer than 3 in the past 30 years. So the missile thrush was the first time ever found in the ABA in Canada. And there's all kinds of listing that people can do. And maybe you've done some of these. There's the backyard listing, patches of certain areas that you go and bird quite often. There's the county listing, like in Florida. I really care about my Miami-Dade because I live there. It's my biggest county in Florida. There's state listing. I do care about my Florida state listing. And then there's a 5-mile radius. Some people do it for their homes or even where they work. And then they just go out and bird that 5-mile radius around that area. So I did that during COVID. And then the lower 48, and then you have ABA, both traditional and the new ABA. So this red phalarope I found in Delaware, and there was a friend of mine from Pennsylvania that was like, oh, there's a red phalarope. You might want to go see if you can see that. An out-of-state birder found that. And I was like, yeah, that was me. I found that. I was looking for an actual redneck grebe and found a red phalarope. So some people get really into like the state listing and want to go and try to find that for their state. So my goal for the year in 2018 was just to work on my life birds. So I was at 632 cumulatively for my life birds. And I just wanted to, slowly, try to get that 700 cumulatively. And I never really thought I would get very high as my numbers did that year. I thought maybe I would get to 600. And then I also found out about this, like 100 birds in every state. And so I had been already chipping away at that as well. I'm working on that. So who really started this whole big year process? I would like to blame the barnacle goose partly. So I was in Connecticut in January and birding, trying to get this barnacle goose because it was a life bird. So life birds trumped, trying to get 100 birds. And I was working on getting 100 birds for Connecticut. And this goose wasn't showing up for 2 days. And at lunch, on the second day, I was like, okay, this isn't much fun. I know why they call it a wild goose chase. And because I can't find the bird and I'm chasing it all around. I'm looking at a lot of Canadas. And I look at the weather in New Brunswick and see, what the snow is doing. And it was 42 degrees for the next 3 days and no snow. So I was like, that's it. I found out about where I could get my lifer long-eared owl in Connecticut, went and did that, and then immediately started driving north. I got as far as Portland, Maine, and was able to sleep there for about 5 hours, get up, and then drive the rest of the way to where the missile thrush would be. So I got there around 2 in the afternoon and was able to see it. It was anticlimactic because I was like, so they had a point and it looked like it was in somebody's backyard, and I was ready to go and knock on this one Canadian's house to see if they were the ones that had the missile thrush, when another Canadian who was outside was like, are you looking for that bird? Because I have my binoculars and camera, and I said yes. And he showed me what tree it was in, and sure enough, it came in to that tree. And I just couldn't believe it. And it was just eating these berries. And then the Bahamian waxwings, which were also a life bird, came into that same tree eating the berries. And so I had 2 lifers, but no like high fives, hugs, or anything to share with anybody. There was not a single Canadian, even on the road, that I could bombard with my story. But it's such a pretty bird. I really like the missile thrush. I was also looking for
He has seen over 803
somebody else is talking.
over the continent, Canada and the US.
Hold it, somebody's not muted. Can you please mute yourself, please?
So I was in Pennsylvania looking for a gyrfalcon, and this father and son who are birding told me about this chicken run that they did in Colorado and Nebraska and Oklahoma, and you can run around and you try to see all these chickens. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a great trip. So I was able to do that that year and plan that and do that. And it was a lot of fun running around and, getting up before like the Gunnison sage grouse. We had to be there like an hour before daybreak. So that I think we got up at 3, got there at 4, and then waited for the chickens to do their dancing. So one of the birds I really wanted to see during my big year were ptarmigan. And on the left-hand side, upper left-hand side, is the white-tailed ptarmigan. And there are 4 white-tailed ptarmigan in the picture right below it on the left-hand side. See if you can find them. The rock ptarmigan I saw in Adak, and the willow ptarmigan was just outside of Anchorage, Alaska. So during a big year, you don't always get to pick where you want to get to go. And so they're not always the most desiring places to go birding. But the Brownsville dump is definitely sought after, and you should go and see the Tempeatus crow. And it was one of my actually great days at a dump. I was there with the deans, and we just happened to show up on the same day. And we were laughing and carry on, and all these gulls are flying around and pooping on our car, and trash is being moved around, and it smells pretty bad, but we were kind of upwind from it, so it wasn't too bad. And then we saw the crows come in, and we went down, and we did find the Tempeatus crow that day. So I did reach 600 and by May 9th. And I, at this point, was still going to go back to work about like June 13th. But I was convinced on this trip, this is the repositioning cruise. I saw the Savins goal. It was my 600 bird, and that I should quit my job and really commit to this big year. And I got my job deferred and was able to, dedicate the rest of the year just focusing on the big year. This is also after my Alaska trips, I was able to really start jumping on planes and flying for birds. So Alaska birding, you need more than just a rental car to get around. You definitely need to fly to different remote places. And you also get to, I went to Attu, and this is the boat that we took. So I'll talk about that in just a moment. So Barrow is at the very top of Alaska, and you can get there by plane, flying out of Anchorage. And they have hotels, they have rental cars, they have a grocery store. They even have a Subway there. And so this is in October where you get the Ross's gull, and then maybe sometimes you get lucky and get an ivory gull. I was not able to get the ivory gull that year. Then there's St. Paul. You can also just fly into there. There's also hotels, and you go around. There's even a cannery that you can join, like go and eat the meals. You just have to get tickets. Fantastic birding around there. Not very much vegetation, and the crab traps are part of the habitat that you look and try to find birds in. And these are just some of the birds that I saw in St. Paul. Nome, you fly one flight to from Anchorage. And once again, there you have hotels, rental cars. And here's some of the birds that you can see, like the blue throat is a yearly thing. The bristle thigh curlew is another one. It's a great hike up to get that one. It can be a little tricky. It was foggy the morning I was there. And then Arctic warbler and Gamble. So you can go from Nome to Gamble, and they get really good birds there. I was only there in the fall. And so here's some of the birds that I got. And that one, it does have a hotel, rustic. And this is not a 5-star, definitely just a 1-star. But I mean, it had hot water. You have your room. And there's a lot of pea gravel that you have to walk around, or you take a 4-wheeler and get around that way. There are bone piles that you walk through to try to spook up some of these the Asian birds. We do sea watching in the morning, and then there's a collaborate like around 10 to walk through the bone piles, and then you can just go wherever you want to go and go as many times as you want through the bone pile, just looking for these great rare birds. ADAC, you can take plane to, and that's what we ended up doing. So this was the start. We met for the Attu trip. You started in ADAC, and when we all landed in ADAC, we found out that our boat was broken and needed a part. So in ADAC, there's only a flight on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So we had to wait 3 days before we could get the flight, but there's definitely great birds there that you can get. I saw the emperor goose. We saw the fallicated duck when we came back from our trip. So then after we got the boat fixed and underway, it takes about 3 days to get by boat out to Attu normally. So we had to stop at Kiska because there was like 18 to 20 foot seas, and it wasn't safe for us to cross to get to ADAC. So we were like 3 islands from the furthest point on the Aleutian chains. And the lesser sand plover was the only time I saw the whole year. We got the like a wood sandpiper there too, and some other birds, but this was the best bird there. So it was a good detour, but that was like a couple days just birding this area. And it also looked like that we might not make it to ADEC. And so, or to Attu. And so I was like, what? That's a possibility? Okay, didn't think that would happen. So, but we did make it to Attu. And so what we would do is we would live on the boat and stay on the boat. So we had breakfast in the morning, and then we take our skiff to the island and had a bag lunch, and we would walk around. And you see this grass here where the gray bunting is at. It was pretty thick in some places, so there was not really trees around. And I highly recommend extra tufts, insulated. My feet stayed quite warm when we were hiking around in this and just looking for the birds. So like in the movie The Big Year, if you've seen that, you can no longer fly into Attu. You have to take a boat. And that only happens one time a year. So as we're going around, you never know what you're going to get to see. Like we did do some biking while we were there. John brought bikes for us to ride around on to look for the birds. And so that was really cool. I did ask if I could stay the night on Attu instead of coming back on the boat. And that's where we'd sleep and shower, and you can do laundry even on the boat. But I wasn't told yes or no, but I didn't push it. But I stayed every night on the boat. And just a list of Attu birds just on the island, code 3s to 5s that we saw while we were there. There was also a lot of Lapland longspurs and snow bunting. So it's not just any bird that's moving. You do have to kind of pick through and see if it is a rare bird or not. So now we're back on in Arizona for this Montezuma quail. And this is just, don't ever give up birding. I was at Mary Jo's place. The Montezuma quail were coming into the feeders. It was Good Friday, and she told me that I missed the Montezuma quail. They had already come in to feed and they had left, and they only come in one time. And I was like, well, I'm here. I'm waiting for a friend to show up. I might as well just sit and see what happens. And nobody else was there. And I was just taking photos of all the other birds that were flying around. And I looked down, and the Montezuma quail did come out, both the male and female. And that was pretty amazing. And they stayed like 14 minutes. Unfortunately, my friend was running late. She did not get to see the quail, but they're super beautiful. I love their design. So the great black hawk, I was in Texas running for the yellow-green vireo, and which I did get to see. And the great black hawk was seen like the day before I arrived. So I did look for it. It wasn't relocated there in Texas, but then later on in July, it was seen in Maine. So I was able to get on a plane with Amanda, and we did chase this bird. We arrived in Boston and got our rental car, and then, it was like, I think it was like 2 hours or so to drive to where it was at, and maybe 3. And we're following the feed. She's driving and I'm watching the Facebook posting and stuff. And we found the road, and we get there and we go down the road, and there's not a single car lining the road. There's not a single person walking up and down. And I was like, uh-oh, it's moved. And I'm checking the feed. Nobody's saying where it's at. We get to the end of the street, and Amanda's like, left or right? And I go right, which turned out to be right. And we did find the group, but people are looking at their cameras and around, but nobody's looking intently or shooting at the bird. And so we get out, and they're like, oh yeah, we just had it, it'll be back. So we were able to get these are some of my shots of the bird, and we followed it around for a little bit. And that was also the day when we arrived that it was seen flying high and out to sea, and then wasn't seen for a while. So we were really fortunate that we were able to get this bird at that time. the acorn woodpecker, I put this in because I was in Arizona again and I was going after the flame colored tanager. And I only had a certain amount of time. We only had this day to get the tanager. And there was a group of people, about 8, 10 of them, and they were looking very intently up into the trees. And I was like, what do you have? And the guy's like, oh, there's an acorn woodpecker up there. And I was like, and I look and I see, and yep, sure enough, it's an acorn woodpecker. And they were just standing there admiring it. But when you're doing a big year, there's a lot of rushing around. And so I was like, oh man, I really wish sometimes I could just stop and pleasure bird and just take in the view of an acorn woodpecker. But I got to keep going. So the curlew sandpiper, I met a lot of people, and some of them would actually notify me before it even hit eBird. There's a curlew sandpiper in North Carolina. So I was with the Deans and the Stoll brothers and Amanda, and we just saw the Himalaya snowcock this in the morning. Started that hike at like 4 o'clock in the morning and saw the birds. And then we came down and I got the message that the curlew was there. So once again, I took like 20 minutes to pack my bags and got in the vehicle with Amanda. The Stoll brothers were taking my van down to Phoenix, so we're going to meet up with them later. And we flew to North Carolina. Along the way, we went back to Phoenix, where Amanda's from, and then flew to North Carolina. And but we got stopped, delayed at one of our flights because of rain. Then we got to the rental car place and we got the car, we got all our stuff in it. And then the air conditioning wasn't working. And you definitely want air conditioning during the summer in North Carolina. So we had to switch vehicles. And then we ran to the site. The person that found the curlew sandpiper, she met up with us. And we saw the curlew sandpiper with the remaining light of the day. So it was a great chase. And then we also saw this curlew sandpiper the next morning as well. So I did go to Hawaii a few times, and these are some of the birds. It is really hard to bird Hawaii, not just because of the terrain is difficult, where there's like for the greater necklace laughing thrush, if it had rain, it's really slippery and muddy, and you have to go up some inclines to see this bird. But it's definitely worth it. And some of the endemic birds there are not doing as great as they could be. So I highly recommend going and seeing Hawaii birds sooner than later if you want to go see those. They're very colorful and showy, and they will not disappoint. But it is a challenge to get into some of these places. You either have to have a guide, or they only offer them once a month, and it's a lottery system to get into it to see the birds. So it is a challenge. Okay, so what's happening in this one is in the upper right-hand corner of the yellow rail. I was at the Rice and Rail festivals with friends, and early on, I had Erin Lang was like, you have to consider the fun factor. So I was trying to keep that in the back of my mind as well as, but have a good time. But then, all these rare birds show up. These other birds, so like the roadside hawk, the flamingo, the gray heron, the banana quit, and the spotted red snake. Towards the end, I still had like a day and a half, 2 days of the Yellow Rail Festival. And I could have very well jumped on a plane, and the Stumans would have understood. They were like fine with it. But, I wanted to spend that time with them, enjoy the Yellow Rail Festival. I really like this festival. And so I decided not to go, stay the whole festival and then get on a plane. And so the first bird that I decided to get was the banana quit. And because of where the location, like where I can get flights from Louisiana and the cost of it as well. And so I decided, and you're also gambling, like how long are these birds going to stay around too? So I went for the banana quit. I got fogged in at the second plane that I got on. So it took a whole day to get to the banana quid. I got there early at dawn. The next morning, had a lift drop me off, and they're seeing the bird as I was getting out of the vehicle. And I saw it, but I didn't get a photo, and it was gone until about 2 p.m. From there, I decided, okay, I want to go for this gray heron because code 5 bird, and you know how rare they are. And so I was like, but I would lose a whole day in travel again, like 4 flights trying to get the gray heron. So I decided I would go and get the spotted redshank, and on my way up to getting the gray heron. So I was able to fly into Michigan and land that evening. And then in the morning, I got the spotted redshank at dawn. Once again, there was nobody there. And I'm like, okay, this is a really good bird. But I found it, and the deans actually showed up. So I had it in the scope, and they walked up and got the bird. So we were traveling to go get the gray heron next. And so we flew all the way into Boston that evening. And then I still had 2 more flights in the morning to get to the gray heron, and then landed in Newfoundland. And a birding friend was there, David Greening, and he told me like where to get the bird and where to even stay. And so got my rental car in the sunset shortly after, because it's the winter time, so the sun is sunny. The sun is sets a lot earlier. So then I drove down like at 4 o'clock in the morning because I wanted to get there at dawn, and was able to have breakfast with the gray heron. And then I had to fly out the next day, was the earliest I could get a plane. And so I went for the roadside hawk, which is in Texas. And there was, once again, it was like four planes to get down to Texas. So that was a whole day of travel. Was able to get that bird when I arrived. And then the flamingo is still waiting patiently at St. Mark's. So went and got that. So Dean Stuman and I went for that, my friend, and we walked around the bayou looking for it where it was being seen constantly and couldn't find it. And he was talking to his wife, Barb, and saying, yeah, we only have like an hour and a half. I like immediately picked up the scope, started walking towards the car, and we continued to talk to Barb. And then we got things packed up and in the vehicle, and a white vehicle shows up and was like, are y'all looking for the big pink bird? Oh yeah, we're looking for that flamingo. And so they told us it was down at the lighthouse. So we like zoomed over there to get the view, and it was out at this point. I was able to get this photo of the bird, and we got a couple other people on it, and then it flew. And this second couple showed up, and we were able to go into this other bay and was able to find the bird. So just as a visual, here's a map to show you what I did in the 11 days to get these birds. So number 1 is down at the bottom where Louisiana is. Then I fly over to Florida, South Florida, Miami, and then up to Michigan, over to Newfoundland, Canada, down to Texas, and then back over to Florida and the Panhandle. So I met the big year birders that were doing that year, sporadically throughout the year. And we were all on the same pelagic out of San Diego in August. And so this is just a picture of us. This was a great trip. I love getting out on the pelagics. I didn't know that before. So that was a great experience. I just love being out on the boat. And we just had a blast out there, just talking and birding, and it was a great time. So my totals for the year, the Smith Longspur was my last bird that I saw in December. I was hoping I get one more bird to chase. And it was before Christmas that I saw the Longspur. And so my totals, so 830 with Hawaii, 774 without Hawaii, so the traditional ABA, and 706 for the lower 48. So I won all three categories in eBird that year. And I was also the number one female birder for all three categories as well, like overall. So back at that lifer list, how many I needed to like 68, I ended up getting 208 lifers. And I got added 15 states to get 100 birds, at least 100 birds in those states. Now, some of these states, I didn't need a whole bunch of birds. I did go to all 50 states that year in birding. And that no other big beer birder has done that before. So that was a really great time. So does anybody have any questions?
Okay. Well, Nicole, what I'll do is if there's any questions from the floor, I'll repeat them to you so that you can hear them.
Sure.
Well, the question is about the pricing of the flights that you're getting on short notice.
So, okay, for example, I was just buying one-way tickets because I didn't necessarily, like, for example, in Hawaii, I flew from the Big Island to Houston. That was $99 because the airlines were having competition again amongst themselves, trying to get people to get to Hawaii. So I just lucked out and got pretty cheap tickets. But like going for like up to Newfoundland, yeah, that was really expensive. And I had some friends help me out, pay either half the ticket, so I could go and chase those birds, or I wouldn't be able to.
Well, there's a chat question. Are all these your photos, Nicole?
Yes, all of these are my photos of the birds.
They're fantastic photos of some really rare birds.
Thank you.
Did you try to photograph all the birds? Did you see all the birds, or were some herd only?
There were some herd only, but I did try to photograph as many as I can. So it's really difficult sometimes, you only get to see it, and you couldn't, like the Sinaloa wren, the bird was singing up a storm, so I have audio for that, but I wasn't able to get a photo of the bird. I could see it flitting around, but it was just in this big tangle that was just really hard to photograph.
Another question from the chat had to do with the communications networks that you have. Obviously, you were traveling with other birders, and how did you set that up? Was it sort of ad hoc as you went along, or was it planned well in advance?
So there were some birders that I was already friends with, and they were trying to help me out. And then other birders, for example, for the Connecticut warbler, I Jackson Bog, and we were trying to find that bird. I had to fly for a pelagic over out of California, and the Stoll brothers we were doing a road trip together. They were looking for the bird, and if they hadn't found the Connecticut, I had met some people at High Island in Texas in April, and I contacted them, and I was like, "Hey, do you know a spot in Connecticut? Because we couldn't get the bird Jackson Bog, then I was prepared to get the bird."
Somebody hasn't muted their background. It's sort of coming over. Could everybody please mute? Okay, here's a question, another chat. I'm sure you had a pack light, but what one item did you wish you had that you didn't bring with you?
Oh, that is a good question.
From the Prime Minister's office.
Valerie, can you turn your microphone off, please?
Protest. On Chris Lewis's point, he's right.
I don't know. That's one item I wish I would have had, because I had it pretty down pat. Like for pretty much June, when I wasn't traveling across the United States, I was just 2 suitcases. I I don't know, more chocolate. Always having chocolate, especially in Alaska.
Any other questions from the floor? Yep.
How is photo equipment that you take with you and audio equipment get sound?
How much of video and audio equipment did you have with you?
So the audio, I use just my iPhone, and my camera, I have the 7D Mark II with a 100 to 400 meter lens. And then I had my spotting scope, Swarovski, which is 25 to 60.
Any other questions from the floor? Yep.
Yes, having been to Attu probably 5 or 6 times, going back to 1996, I'm curious as to what the status of all the buildings you stayed at, the Coast Guard Station, the land station, have they all been razed, or are they still there?
Well, the question is on Attu, what is still there in terms of the structures? Because it's been abandoned for a while.
I did get to see the buildings where the birders would stay at. There's no like windows anymore, and it's pretty dilapidated. There are still places you can see where birders wrote their number from previous years, like their totals. And we did actually also write our numbers on whatever we had at that point on the walls as well when we were in Attu.
So you went there with
But
a tour
there's
group?
no like, yeah, John Pusak is the one that went out. He's the only one that goes out to Attu. And there wasn't like any running water. I don't remember like there was running water anymore, but yeah, the buildings, since they're not being used, they're pretty dilapidated and with the wind all the time there and such.
Quite an adventure. Any other questions from the floor? Well, no more questions here, Nicole. Thank you very much for telling us about your exciting time here. You obviously went to some far-flung places.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So come back up to the villages sometime.
Okay, I will do that, definitely.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Everybody very much enjoyed. I'm going to stop the recording.